Coming up on this episode of Belief Hole.
You're not supposed to let them in. There's something telling you at your very core, this is wrong, this is bad, run, fight or flight, get out. And you make that choice and you say no, and then you just have a creepy story to tell. But those are people that actually invited them in.
Right.
You're not going to hear what happens once the permission is given.
Because they take your soul. He was staying at his grandmother's home and the TV turned on. And then he saw what looked like Muppets, but they weren't. He said they had realistic teeth. And they kept trying to get him to come closer to the television.
That's really creepy.
It's this sort of thing where they're trying to get you to do something.
Yeah.
Pulling you in.
That's so creepy. I can imagine like dark crystal puppets like looking at you and they're like...
The Skeksis.
There's always a one telling thing. It's the same idea with black-eyed kids. They look normal. What's the one thing? It's the eyes. It's sort of like the demon idea.
They can't quite get it right. And then I start to glance up and I see white paint on his face. But there's also blood coming out of his ear. All that I can remember about his eyes is being dark, like pitch dark.
Right.
Like a cold baby shark.
Yes, like
or just
cold...
a regular
Why is he baby?
size. Because he's the size of a human. A baby shark is.
Really?
It's closer than a large shark.
As soon as they have your attention, you are under their control.
So much like the old vampire stories.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like seduction.
Sexy.
You almost have to break out of the spell.
Yeah, it's being spellbound.
It makes me think of Fright Night when they're in the dance club.
Oh, the dance club
and it's
scene?
like boom, pa-ta-pa-ta, boom, pa-boom, pa-ta-pa-ta.
This madness starts burning.
Conspiracy.
Synchronicity, Sasquatch,
Donald Trump.
alien races, Satanism in Hollywood, MK Ultra,
Pleiadians.
Mandela effect,
Close the door, Id.
Jeremy, close your door!
Snowflakes.
Inner Earth disagreements,
My lab.
JFK assassination,
Flat Earth.
Corey Feld, magicians are demons, specters and spooks, sleep paralysis, Muslim Islamicist, the gender spectrum, alternative history, shadow people,
Quiet, I'm trying to say words with the mouth.
psilocybin, sorcery, poltergeist, sulforaphane, evolution, is it real?
Skull and Bone. Elf Tower. I would never talk about it. That's old. Y2K.
Cover-ups, the Oklahoma City bombing, vampire.
Well, hello, children of the hole. Welcome. Children of the hole.
Children of the Hole. We got it. Yeah, that works.
We'll use that for now.
It works okay. I like Belieflings. I think that sounds good when I
That's
hear
probably
it.
the best one. It's not like
fun.
too obtrusive.
Yeah, it's not too intense.
Beliefling is like the general nomenclature, but the children of the whole incorporate a larger range of...
Demographic.
Beliefling sounds more like a child.
Yes.
Well, they're all children
There's
of
probably
the whole.
some men that don't want to be called.
Well, they can
Beliefling.
suck it up.
What's going on?
Okay, so speaking of children of the whole, we are going to be covering a topic today that may be reminiscent to those of you out there who are old school horror fans of a concept known as Children of the Corn, right? Aren't these kind of similar?
Oh, yeah, I guess in some ways.
Didn't they have black eyes?
No.
No?
They had white eyes?
Did they?
I think so.
What's this phenomenon
This is
called?
black-eyed children.
The subject we are covering today, as we get into the spooky Halloween season, is known as the black-eyed kids or the black-eyed children, which has a lot of connections in folklore mythology, depending on how you want to look at it. But it's a more recent kind of urban legend phenomenon that may or may not be real.
Oh, come
Well,
on.
Well, I'm not going to jump right in and say we know for sure this is real.
I know, but you don't even have to say that.
Okay. Well, I just wanted people to know that we're not like...
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people have been scrutinizing the phenomenon as just modern folklore, like creepypasta stuff.
Yeah.
Because they think that the guy who wrote the initial post about it, Brian Bethel, who's a news journalist, and we'll get into more of him later on, they started coming out and saying, well, he wrote this post and like he didn't really talk about it afterwards, so he probably made it up. And there's a whole backstory to why he stopped talking to people about it. It had nothing to do with him fabricating it. It had to do with him being asked the same 5 questions over and over. So he kind of like went silent for a while on the topic. And then right as he did is when the phenomenon really took a big boom online. And then people started saying that he made it up for creepypasta and all this other stuff. So eventually, years later, he's like, all right, I'm going to talk to people again about it and set the record straight. This happened to me. I'm a journalist. I'm a credible person. I wouldn't write this for, it wouldn't help my career as a journalist because you have to suspend disbelief to believe it. You're going to, potentially.
Right. We'll get more into that.
Yeah,
later
that's
on.
coming up.
No, that was good though, because it's kind of important, because it does seem like, to me, it just seems like such an urban legend.
Well, and here's another, I think an interesting point to make is that another reason why people are initially skeptical of the idea is because you heard about it all at once on the internet, and the argument against it being just fabricated online is that, well, there wasn't a way to instantly share these experiences. So, of course, the first place you're going to start seeing people share these stories is online, because it's the first time you're in constant contact with strangers. So before that, people were having these experiences sporadically around the world throughout the generations, but had no way to communicate to other people who had similar experiences. So I think it's an interesting point.
In this phenomenon that we're going to break down in a second here, some of the attributes of it, of the black-eyed kids, it's a phenomenon that has similar attributes to other things in history, right? In folklore, demonology. So, I mean, yeah, the black-eyed kids in their typical description of being, mysterious children in hoodies that approach you asking for things that you don't want to give them, namely your will or your invitation to let them into wherever you happen to be. That's a certain kind of growth of this idea of the demon, the thing that needs you to invite them in.
The vampire.
The vampire.
Another example of that.
Right. And this as a more modern version, but it could just be that it is evolving with time, and with our modern culture, it changes. It doesn't mean that it's made up and matches the things that we experience today.
Did you hear it on the internet?
I did. I heard it on the internet. Actually, no. I didn't know that. Where I first heard this was Monsters and Mysteries in America.
I think that's what blew it up.
Yeah, it was a TV show on the Travel Channel, like Destination America or something. But they did this creepy series, and I remember hearing that for the first time there. But we will get more into that later. Chris, do we want to get into breaking out some of the attributes, or is there anything else you guys want to say before we get into the meat?
So, Christian, this is your show right now, buddy.
Thanks, Pauly. I do like that sound.
Pauly
It makes
Shore?
me feel like validated.
I know.
when you
It's
play
like,
it.
take it away, Chris.
I do respect that man.
Pauly Shore?
I love him. He's great. I heard him on a podcast a couple years ago.
The only thing you have ever cared about in your life is nugs, chillin', and grindage.
Wow.
What
Nugs, chilling, and
film was that
grinding.
from? Because he was in like
Encino
three, wasn't he?
Man.
Oh, it's Encino Man. Oh, was that Samwise Gamgee?
It certainly was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nugs, chillin'.
The only thing you care about is nugs, chillin', and grindage.
Man, I miss the 90s movies.
I don't know what any of those things
Nugs,
are.
I'm guessing, is pot.
Yeah.
And they probably couldn't say it because it was a PG movie.
Chillin'.
Chilling and grinding.
It's chilling before Netflix.
Grindage, would that be skateboarding?
Grindage.
Yeah,
Did he skate?
probably.
I don't remember him
think so.
skateboarding in that.
He had a skateboard, I think.
Or maybe it's like humping.
Grindage.
Grindage? When you're still a teen?
Yeah.
And you can't quite. Okay.
Okay, back to the reality.
Moving on. Okay, the concept of black-eyed kids is obviously creepy. And for those of you out there who haven't heard of this phenomenon,
John, let me paint a scenario.
yeah, Jim,
for
you paint a scenario.
All right, John, you're in your living room, in your bathrobe. It's 3 a.m. You'd fallen asleep after watching late night TV, like you like to do, those shows you like to watch.
I'm very known for that.
And you wake up startled to a fright. There's 3 knocks on your door. And you approach the door, look out the window, see a small figure, open the door, and standing in your door is a small child whose face maybe you can barely see, maybe looking kind of down, but in a calm, assertive tone says, "Mister, can you help me? I need to use your phone." What would you do?
My eyes would get real big, first of all. I don't know. I'd
What would you do?
3 in the morning?
Yeah, or anytime between 1 and 3.
Well, if it happened the way these stories describe, the odd calmness of it would freak me out.
Yeah.
And their black eyes probably too.
Well, yeah, and you may not see the black eyes at first, but
Hey, mister, it's 3 a.m. We're cold.
Also, do kids still say mister to adults? Like, hey, mister.
know.
I feel like it's a very
Well,
like 50s kind of thing.
this is the language from Brian's story, which I'm glad you played the Pauly Shore clip because that came out around the time that this happened, oddly enough, in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
His encounter happened in 97, I think. 96,
Tying it
97.
back in.
It's got to tie it in. Everything's connected. But in his story, is what we're going to come up to shortly here to kind of give the basic idea of the first example of a modern black-eyed kid experience. Yeah, he used the word mister. And there's this theme through these stories where they will ask for things that don't quite make sense, kind of like the Men in Black. we've gone over the Men in Black and how, they might not know how to chew Jell-O, or they might come in and...
Yeah, they wouldn't know how to eat food in the right
I'm
way.
trying to think of specific questions they would ask that would just be odd. But with the black-eyed kids, it's distinctly designed, these questions, to get them inside your home or your car.
Like a vampire.
Like a vampire.
An invitation.
Yeah. Can we use your phone? We're cold. Can we come inside? These kinds of things.
Right, and often it's in rural areas where someone's far from other homes, like in the middle of the woods.
Are most of these stories in like small town-ish areas?
A lot of them are.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, mister, I got something for you.
Did I throw you off there?
What was I saying?
But yeah, other attributes. Actually, some that also remind me of the Men in Black kind of thing. You have the ashen skin, gray or olive tone.
Right.
Like those are both descriptive colors of like Men in Black. Obviously like the black eyes is the main thing.
Right.
And that's what really sets people off. Like before they see the eyes in these stories, they'll have the sensation of terror and this sort of very unnerving, unnatural fear, but they don't know why. But once they see the eyes, it's like for a moment they might get locked into that dark gaze.
Yeah.
But that overwhelmingly, they flee. And that's the other interesting thing is, I always hear people say or read people discussing this and they say, well, but I don't think black-eyed kids are hurting anybody because you never hear about them like going in and
Right.
killing anybody. I was like, well, you're not going to hear about it. They're going to be dead.
Yeah.
So obviously I think the people that respond with the fear response and they slam the door in their face or they take off in their car, like in Brian's case, they survive that encounter. So
Right.
who knows
Spoiler
what
alert.
happens? Well, he writes a story.
Well, it could have been, someone could have been on the phone listening to it going down.
Come now.
The general theme is that you don't want to let them in. As you've said, people would say like, we never hear about them hurting anybody.
Right.
But would you? What happens if you're filled with this intense sense of dread? Like you're not supposed to let them in. There's something telling you at your very core, this is wrong, this is bad, run, fight or flight, get out. And you make that choice and you say no, and then you just have a creepy story to tell. But those are people that actually invited them in. Like how many people in even stories of vampires, in fiction have let a vampire in and then been fine, like they had tea.
Right.
Like you're not going to hear what happens once the permission is given.
It's sort of like a Dogman sighting,
Exactly. And it reminds me of that too, that odd sense. We covered a Dogman sighting and this thing was tapping on the glass and the woman just felt this odd gravity, this sinister evil, but this feeling of being drawn to it.
Yeah, that's right.
Being pulled in, like you don't know why, but you feel like part of you is compelled to let it in.
The same thing could be with the black-eyed kids. It's like, well, those are the ones that we heard of, but we didn't hear about the ones where they did get in the car and obviously...
Right. No, that's so true. Because they take your soul. Because if your soul gets eaten by a black-eyed kid or a werewolf eats you alive...
There's no story.
Where's
to
that
tell.
story coming from?
Right.
A surveillance camera, maybe? I don't know.
Yes, and definitely there are plenty of black-eyed kid stories and Dogman stories out there that could totally be creepypasta. For sure, there are many that actually for sure are. But it's funny because the way you can definitely tell is when you read a submitted story and it's like, this happened to so-and-so. It's like third person. They tell the story about this person and then they were never seen again.
Right.
Well, how do you know that account ever happened if they never
Exactly.
recounted that experience? That's an obvious, fiction.
Yeah. Well, there was this old story that I love about the hitchhiker. Do you guys remember that story?
Oh, there's plenty of Hitchhiker
Such a
Lore.
good story. So
There was only one written.
There's only one.
the basic idea of the hitchhiker story was that there was a person driving out on the highway, desert roads, right, going over these hills, and every time he would go around a curve, he came across this hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker, asking for a ride, staring at him creepily, and the man was like, I can't let him in my car, so he keeps going. And then he passes the next curve, and there he is again. And every time he gets closer, or he's still wanting a ride. I forget exactly how this plays out, but eventually he runs out of gas or something, and he can't get away from the hitchhiker, and it kills him. But then at the end of the story, it's like, well, who wrote the story? It's just him in a car with the hitchhiker.
The OnStar agent's like, what does he have a hook? What's going on?
I'll turn you into spaghetti. But yeah, who did maybe it was the Hitcher's Diary.
Urban legend.
Urban legend. But these stories, this concept is king in creepypasta land.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, creepypasta is, the term comes from when people just used to copy stories over and over and send them down email chains and stuff. It was called copypasta. And then creepypasta was when it was the creepy stuff that they would take on a life of their own.
This was in the early days of the internet?
Absolutely, yeah. Like forums, chain emails, stuff like that, chat rooms.
That's kind of an interesting evolution in itself when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's like modern folk stories.
Well, it's just funny too because it started up with the dial-up, probably in that era, these stories. And this idea of like sharing information, and now you have like 4chan and Reddit and all these things that, and all, YouTube, where you can just, stuff travels just much more.
I think 4chan has claimed that the official naming of it becoming creepypasta over time was under their platform, I think.
Well,
neither here nor there.
Who cares?
Yeah. Anyways, you were explaining,
thanks.
What was your relation to?
Oh, but some of these stories, we have actual people telling these stories and we know who they are. The Brian Bethels, obviously the prime example.
We don't have a clip of that, do we?
Of Brian Bethel?
Yeah.
No, but we are going to recount his story from his words.
I know, it's so much better to hear the actual inflection of the voice, though.
I know. Well, I wanted to get an interview with him, but we just didn't have time.
Can we ask what did you think of the interview? Did he sound like a credible person?
I did want to bring this out.
Because the way people tell stories and recount the event is so critical to the belief of,
right.
Because you don't have anything else to go on.
Exactly. I always prefer to hear it from the person's, not just written word, but like actual speaking.
Can you hear the fear in their voice?
One thing that struck me is really interesting about Brian Bethel is that I've heard him talk about his experience, even on Monsters and Mysteries, where I think we were alerted to him in 2008 or whatever that was. But he was talking about his experience on that show and saying how it was a very disappointing experience because he said the producers would try to get him to say things that didn't happen on that show.
Well, they encouraged him to say things a certain way.
Yeah, or like say, were you sure there wasn't, a string of missing people in the area?
Right.
They wanted him to refer to where he lived as the Badlands, too.
Right, which is a different location.
Right.
It was in Texas, and the Badlands like South Dakota or something. Anyway, I think that makes him more credible, too, is like he would say, like, they're wanting to put words in my mouth. It was creepy enough as it was.
Right.
The fact that I was doing this mundane thing and these things approached me is what was so scary about it.
Right.
It wasn't that I was out there looking for a lost child or something, or I was playing with a Ouija board. I was writing a check to my cable company so I keep my internet on.
Right.
Like it was a mundane thing that everybody does. That's what made it so scary for him, which I agree with. I think that's what makes it spooky. It can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
I definitely believe his account. And he also said, like, if someone could explain this to me, or someone could come up to me and say, like, hey, it was me and my friend, and, we were pulling a prank, or you just missed sauce, and I don't know why you acted that way, but we just wanted to ride.
Nice guys.
He's like, but no one's ever said that to me. And he's like, I have a hard time believing that it was a combination of strange things that made me completely disoriented and experience this, not the way that I felt it happened.
Right. There's something very strange about it that was more than just the way they looked. It was a feeling.
Right.
Well, that's an interesting part of the story too, because I think we all have that ability to sense like when things are really off.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've had a specific situation, but I felt that feeling before where it's just like, this is wrong. This is off.
Like that hotel you stayed in?
Yeah, I guess that's a pretty good. Although, there was no way for me to see exactly what would have happened. But yeah, everything in my inner, and I was far away from the hotel. Yeah,
that's a great story. Listeners, if you're out there and you want to hear what John's referring to, check out last year's Halloween episodes.
You remember the episode it was in?
It was, I don't think was it Shadow People? Or it might have been Real Haunted Places.
I told that story?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was a good story.
But yeah, humans have this unique ability, so do animals too. And to have it go off that intensely for something as benign as like two kids asking for, because it would have to be like, even if you thought it was a little off, most rational adults, if they're like 12, 14 years old and they're not menacing, but to have that level of fear response, something was off about it.
He said it was the most terrified he's ever been in his life.
There's something deeper going on.
That's like standing next to an alligator, but
there's just like there's a primal fear.
Sort of fear that comes over you. I've heard that before. It's not the same exact phenomenon, but that feeling of just like ancient primal fear.
Yeah.
Where it just like kind of takes over you.
It kind of reminds me of the shadow people kind of thing, specifically with night paralysis. Related to that, like my experience that I had, that was still to this day, the most terrifying thing that I've ever felt. Like seeing that thing in the corner of my room. And it wasn't because it was a spooky, shadowy man standing there. People talk about having other ghost experiences, and they're not terrified to their core of their soul.
Right.
Like there's a difference there because in that situation, much like I've read about in these Black Eyed Kids experiences, is that there's a feeling of evil. Like there's an awareness of you as an individual. Like it knows you somehow personally, which takes it to a whole nother level of creepy. It's not just some random interloper from some other dimension that's come in here or whatever. There's some sort of connection. It's there for you.
Right.
That's what's so terrifying about it. And it's hungry.
Yeah.
It wants to taste your goodness.
Wants your soul. What's just as scary? Well, I won't say that. What's also really scary that kind of gets overlooked with night paralysis stories is when you're laying in bed with someone with night paralysis.
Oh, yeah.
And you wake up to them waking up in terror. is a really fucking scary thing.
Happens with you, doesn't it?
Happened with me last night.
Last night?
Mm-hmm. Which sucked because the whole night I'm researching until 3 a.m. researching black-eyed kids, and I finally get in bed and trying to fall asleep, and then after a little while I hear, go. I'm just like, it's okay, it's a dream. But she has a lot of night, and she doesn't sound that weird. But you're a terrified person
panic,
trying to wake up,
Yeah.
And she's dealt with that before, but it's terrifying.
That's not a night. Is that a night terror? Is that what you said?
Night terror,
Or
yeah.
isn't it just a nightmare?
Yeah, but night terrors can be a lot more real, and you have an inability to wake up, but you're trying to wake up, and that can happen in nightmares too. But she suffered from sleep paralysis before, where you actually are frozen and you're awake. Like you
know the feeling of when you're like trying to
trying to wake up.
You try to yell, and it kind of like wakes you up.
Somebody help me.
And you can hear, or you can.
That.
Like when you're in a dream, a nightmare, and you're trying to wake yourself up, but you're in this other place, right? This other scenario that's going on. Someone's chasing you, some murder or something. You're trying to wake yourself up. This can't be real. This can't be real. Wake up. But what her experiences have been are, she can see me, and she's trying to tell me to wake her up.
Yeah.
Because she can't escape this evil thing that's trying to get into her body.
She can see you from a soul level?
She can see, like she can see me laying next to her in
But
the
she's
bed.
not, her eyes aren't open, right? Or are they?
I don't know. I don't know if sometimes they are open or if sometimes, but yeah, anyways, it's
getting
freaky.
a little off here.
Yeah, but we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to get into Brian Bethel's story, the original encounter in modern times about the black-eyed kids. And we're going to break it down. We're going to use his own words and then paraphrase some of it. And we're going to do it right.
And then we've got a couple other good stories to share of these experiences with these black-eyed kids, so stick around.
And then we're giving away a car, so there's going to be a raffle.
Right. So please stay to the end. It's free for whoever makes it all the way. That's
all right.
True.
See you in a bit.
And we're back, everybody.
Welcome back.
Thanks for coming back. We're about to tell the notorious encounter with Brian Bethel and the black-eyed
Infamous
boy children.
Yeah. So is this a paraphrase? Are you going to retelling it, or are you going to read verbatim his?
So this is what I did, okay? So I looked online and I was trying to find the earliest record of this, because you go to BuzzFeed, you go to Snopes, you go to these places that are just, they don't have all their facts straight. One was saying that this happened in 1998, when in reality they were quoting an email that he was repasting his story from an earlier email or form or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was 96 or something.
Right.
96.
But they took the date of the email and said it happened on August 17th, 1998.
Oh, as if that was the occurrence?
That's when the email was sent.
Yeah, that's a little incorrect.
It was just lazy, but it is hard. I will say,
Not that we get everything right.
Right, of course we don't. But when you're researching these topics too, Google is not your friend. You have to dig way deep to get anything relevant, because you're just getting regurgitated list feeds.
Right.
know.
I mean, it is getting harder to research on the internet, isn't it?
It is. I'm starting to
Especially through YouTube.
I asked my friend Pat for a website that has lists to a lot of academic books and other books that are available online to search.
Academic? Oh, academic.
Academic.
I thought you said acnic.
And I started searching like Smithsonian.org, which was kind of silly, but they have like a lot of stuff that I guess doesn't pop up on Google right away. So I was searching Smithsonian for black-eyed children.
Wow. Are you 9 years old?
Did you get out your Encyclopedia Britannica?
Well, I know, but I was looking for something concrete, something with some reference other than because the problem with these
that's a lot of the stuff. It's just hard to corroborate.
It's hard to corroborate, but on like list verse and stuff, you'll read them and then it'll be like, this is posted from Mr. Universe and that's posted from, didn't give the reference, or, there's hard to find the original stuff. So I was trying to find some stuff, but with Brian Bethel in this story, I was able to finally find his
original post.
And it was in a Google forum, and I don't even know if it's the exact original. There was one previous to that, but he had reposted it in 1997, the year after it happened. So it's the closest you can get, I think. And we'll link it in the show notes.
The closest you can get, Gillette.
So we'll link in the show notes if you guys are interested in reading his original encounter. But what I did was I kind of paraphrased the beginning to set up the scenario. He had some extra description stuff I didn't think we needed just for the story, but the full version will be in our show notes. So guys, go to beliefhole.com, find this episode page, episode 30, and links will be in there.
Episode 30. That's a lot of episodes.
Feeling dirty. We didn't even rhyme it this time.
I know. I mean, congratulations to us because
Good job, we
did a good job.
That's a lot of episodes. It is a lot of episodes.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But
So
it's been fun.
it's been fun, and we appreciate everyone who's sticking around.
All right, so back to the story.
Okay, so I did want to mention Brian Bethel. We were going to give a basically description of who he was. He was a reporter for the Abilene Reporter News, which is a local paper in Abilene, Texas.
I think
where
he
this
might still
occurred.
be, actually.
I think he might be.
Am I doing the voice right now?
Yeah, you're going to be doing the Mr. Blue voice.
Mr. Blue Voice. You mean the kid?
The kid that I put in blue text for you to read. All right. Sometime in the spring or summer of 1996, a man named Brian Bethel pulled up to a movie theater in Abilene, Texas. It was late at night, but he wasn't there to watch a film. He was there to drop off a check at Camelot Communications, an internet company whose office shared a plaza with the theater. While writing out the check in the glow of the marquee light, he was approached by two young boys. Now, from here on out, this is going to be Brian's exact words for the most part. I looked over and saw two children staring at me from the street. Both were boys, and my initial impression is that they were somewhere between 10 and 14. Only one of the boys spoke the entire time. We'll call him the spokesman. Boy number one was slightly taller than his companion, wearing a pullover, hooded shirt with a sort of gray check pattern on jeans. I couldn't see his shoes. His skin was olive-colored and had curly, medium-length brown hair. Boy number two had pale skin with a trace of freckles. His primary characteristics seemed to be looking around nervously. He dressed in a similar manner to his companion, but his pullover was a light green color. His hair was a sort of pale orange. Oh great, I thought. They're gonna hit me up for money. But then the air changed. So there I was, filling out a check in my car, which was still running, and in a sudden panic over the appearance of two little boys. I was confused, but more than that, a seemingly unwarranted and overwhelming sense of fear and unearthliness rushed in. The spokesman smiled, and the sight, for some inexplicable reason, chilled my blood. I could feel fight or flight responses kicking in. Something I knew instinctively was not right, but I didn't know what it could possibly be. So I rolled down the window very, very slightly and asked, "Yes?" The spokesman smiled again, broader this time. His teeth were very, very white.
Hey, mister, what's up? We have a problem.
His voice was of a young man, but his diction quite calm, and something I couldn't put my finger on made my desire to flee even greater.
You see, my friend and I want to see the films, but we forgot our money. We need to go to our house to get it. Want to help us out?
Now, as a journalist, I've talked to a lot of people, and I know how kids generally communicate. This was very different. He was not awkward or excitable. His command of language was incredible, and he showed no signs of fear. He spoke as if my help was a foregone conclusion. Both children seemed disturbed by my hesitation.
Come on, mister. We just want to go to our house. And we're just two little boys.
Now that really scared me. Something in the tone and diction again set off alarm bells. My mind was frantically trying to process what I was perceiving about the two figures that was wrong. I felt myself digging my fingernails into the steering wheel. "What movie are you going to see?" I asked finally.
Mortal Kombat, of course.
The silent one nodded in affirmation, standing a few paces behind. "Oh," I said. I stole a quick glance at the marquee and at the clock in my car. Mortal Kombat had been playing for an hour already, the last showing of the evening. They grew impatient.
Come on, mister. Let us in. We can't get in your car until you do.
The spokesman said soothingly.
Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go to our mother's house.
We locked eyes. To my horror, I realized my hand had strayed toward the door lock, which was engaged, and was in the process of opening it. I pulled it away, probably a bit too violently, but it did force me to look away from the children, and for the first time I noticed their eyes. They were coal black, no pupil, no iris, just two staring orbs reflecting the red and white light of the marquee. At that point, I know my expression betrayed me. The silent one had a look of horror, as if he knew they'd just been found out. The spokesman, on the other hand, wore a mask of anger. His eyes glittered brightly in the half-light.
Come on, mister. We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun.
The last statement scared the living hell out of me, because at that point, by his tone, he was plainly saying, "We don't need a gun." He noticed my hand shooting down toward the gear shift. The spokesman's final words contained an anger that was complete and whole, and yet contained in some respects a tone of panic.
We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay! Let us in!
I ripped the car into reverse and tore out of the parking lot. I noticed the boys in my peripheral vision, and I stole a quick glance back. They were gone. The sidewalk by the theater was deserted. I drove home in a heightened state of panic. Had anyone attempted to stop me, I would have run right through and faced the consequences later. I bolted into my house, scanning all around, including the sky.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting at the end, too, where he including scanning this, like he looked at the sky.
Yeah.
Like he knew that there was something paranormal. Like, could these things fly after him?
It definitely seemed to affect him in a way that almost like a nightmare. You're just like, like they can bend the laws of physics.
Right.
Potentially.
One other interesting note I thought about the story was when he noticed his hand going to the lock to unlock it.
Yeah, like it had mesmerized him.
Like he was mesmerized. And that's going to come up later, the mesmerization. Because that's a thing that we encountered, just like the Dogman we mentioned earlier, that feeling of being pulled into the dark, where it has this kind of seductive draw to you.
Like the open closet at night in the corner of the room.
Right. Even though you know it's dangerous and there might be evil there, there's still a sense of like,
you
need to know, you know.
Like the opening credits of American Horror Story.
Exactly like that.
Man. It's disturbing but seductive.
Like, come in and play.
It's like, I don't want to look at this, but I am.
Oh, it's so gory. Did they change their opening? Do they always have the same
every
one?
season's new depending on the storyline.
I think I like the Coven one the best. Then it started getting really graphic after that.
They were graphic before,
can't handle the graphic.
Well, it's just...
The gore is just a little over the top.
I think the first season was still the best.
The first was great.
It was just all psychological.
Mm-hmm.
The Coven was starting to become my favorite until like halfway through.
Until it got really...
I did think the clown one was pretty creepy. I watched the
Carnival.
That was like the... No, it was the... Was it the Carnival? It was with the cult, like the political one.
Oh yeah, that was a crossover. That clown was from the season before, which was like the Carnival one. Oh. And then the cult, he was in that too.
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were some pretty graphic parts in that.
Good stories. Not to talk too much about that show, but I just started watching it again last night because the Apocalypse, the latest season came out. And I realized
we are now moving into a tangent. Please sit back, buckle up, and enjoy the ride.
This will be fast.
We will return momentarily.
It's weird though because I went back to watch the hotel thing because there were crossovers from the hotel season, but there was a little monster baby that one of the vampires had and had black eyes. And I was like, that's weird because I'm just researching it.
I remember that, yeah.
But it's actually, I realized if I just skip like skip 30 seconds through like the super deep gore stuff, I can get through without feeling too demonically overcome.
Too soul destroyed.
Demonically overcome.
But anyway, his story is still, and like after listening to, and we'll link some interviews with him telling his story too and talking about his experience so you guys can, judge for yourselves. But after listening to him actually tell his account, you really walk away with a feeling of genuineness. Like there's authenticity. Right. Like he wasn't doing it for, and obviously he wasn't doing it for any sort of fame or money because he didn't get paid for the Monsters and Mysteries appearance that he made.
He didn't get paid at all? According to him, no.
Oh, wow.
We're linking in our show notes also his first official writing on the story, I think it was 2013, for the Abilene Reporter News that he worked for, where he wrote about his experience with Monsters and Mysteries in America for the Travel Channel or Destination America, whatever it was. And said like all the things you were saying where they wanted him to say things more excited. They wanted, they were trying to like build up his story. Yeah. And for him, it was like a real story. It was already scary. And he reiterated, I'm not doing this for, the money. I didn't get paid for that. I was on TV. I didn't get any money for that story. So if that's true, that definitely is a point in the potentially true column. And there are skeptical arguments about him. Like he was interested in the supernatural when he had posted on his...
that does make a difference.
Yeah.
Though. It's like a little bit of a conflict of interest almost.
Right. Like he was, and actually in Monsters and Mysteries in America, on this episode, it was season 1, episode 4, I think, the Badlands. But they talk about how he called his friend who's a psychiatrist, and his friend is on the show, and he's like, I've never seen him so scared, et cetera, et cetera. But even in Brian Bethel's own story, they left this part out of the documentary. In his story on this forum post that we'll link in the show notes, he talks about calling his friend Brad, who is his friend and fellow ghost hunter. He's not just a psychologist.
Oh, yeah.
He's actually a ghost hunter, and they work together hunting ghosts and spirits. But I think the show, because that would make it sound a little more like conflict of interest, they left that part out and just called him like a psychologist friend.
Well,
his friend Brad.
I listened to him talk about it. He talked about how like it sounded like he's had a handful of strange experiences in his life, but nothing that was like he had an experience in college where he saw the ghost of this dead girl, and it was right after there was a murder on campus, which was like an actual murder that did occur, and other people have seen this and reported the same thing, and he briefly talked about it, but he never like wrote books about the paranormal. There was nothing to do with his professional life that had to do with the paranormal. It was all hobby based. He had an experience when he was younger that I thought was fascinating because it reminded me of his experience I had at Grandma and Grandpa's house with Gremlins.
Ooh, do tell.
I will tell. But he had this experience where he was staying at his grandmother's home, and the TV turned on. And he said that his dad would always turn it off by unplugging it. It was because before they had remotes for the television. And so he knew it was unplugged, but it just came on, and then he saw what looked like Muppets, like they were imitating Muppets, but they weren't. He said they had realistic teeth, which was the one off-putting thing. Ew. And they kept trying to get him to come closer to the television.
Wait, so this is when it's off?
Yeah, it's unplugged.
So it was unplugged, but the TV was on?
The TV comes on after it's been unplugged when he's trying to sleep on the couch in the living room or whatever. And
is this Brian Bethel's story?
That's really creepy.
Yeah. Is Brian Bethel's story?
Brian Bethel's story is when he was younger. But it reminds me of that time when we were at Grandma and Grandpa's, and you and I had shared what we thought was a dream, but now older, looking into this stuff, I think maybe screen memory or something, because we shared the exact same dream about gremlins coming in through the window in the guest room we were staying in. It came
they were downstairs on the mantle behind the photos.
Yeah, running around and came up into our room, and yeah. But when I was listening to Brian tell his story, it felt like that same sort of experience. Your memory as a young child of like this strange thing happening. And he said his parents did say it, they remember him screaming in the living room talking about these Muppet things when they came out. When they came out, the TV shut off. So he knows at least that for sure happened, and he's skeptical himself. He's like, I remember this super visually. Could it have been a nightmare? Like, he's like, it didn't feel like a nightmare. Granted, I was young, but I do know for a fact that my parents witnessed me screaming in the living room. Could it have been a thing? But I think what's interesting is it ties into his other story. It's this sort of thing where they're trying to get you to do something. Yeah. Pulling you in. That sort of.
I don't like the puppet one or whatever. That's so creepy. I can imagine like Dark Crystal puppets like looking at you and they're like,
the Skeksis.
Where everything they look like a Muppet, except there's always a one telling thing, which is the like
giant fangs with blood
or like
on.
they look real. It's the same idea with black-eyed kids. They look normal. What's the one thing? It's the eyes. It's sort of like the demon idea. Like
they can't quite get it right.
They can't quite get it right. There's always something a little off, which is like Men in Black too.
But there has to be some sort of warning too that they have to put off to people.
Yeah, I forget where I read this.
Like, we're telling you what we're doing, but we still want you to comply.
I wanted to include this in the notes, but that's exactly right, John. I forget where I read this, but it was some book of demonology or something that I found reference to where they talked about demons being able to take human form or realistic shape in this material world, and there was always something that had to be off with them.
Right.
Whether it was like a mutated hand or the skin wasn't quite right or something with their face or their eyes.
Yeah.
And there's always something that has to be a tell, and that's kind of like the hint to you, like they can't be perfectly disguised.
Right.
And the eyes make sense too when you think about the gateway to the soul. Like if it is this dark entity,
that's for sure where
you can't
would
replicate
be able
that.
to. Yeah, I mean, and you can see, like, you can tell, you can look into people's eyes, and people that are disturbed or even have killed people, like serial killers, there's
you
something
can see it in their eyes.
Yeah, there's something not right about the eyes.
That's interesting you bring that up because they do talk a lot about experiences with people who are severely disturbed. You want to call it possession or whatever, where they do these hideous things, but there's often stories of people who have experience of surviving these experiences where they said their eyes went black. There was a physical change. It was like they didn't just look, they didn't have an angry expression. There was a darkness about their eyes.
Yeah, you hear a lot of like demon possession and stuff. When the eyes go black, they go dark. There's like a change. So that definitely almost like is a blocking of the soul. And it's interesting that, when we walk down the street and we look at each other and people on the road, the first thing you look at generally is, even if you're 30, 40, 50 feet away from somebody, you'll look over and you realize you're meeting the eyes of someone else, right? You're looking at that dude or whatever, and he's looking right back at your eyes. There's just a natural tendency in order to know each other, you look at the eyes. And I think it's interesting that these things like this that you encounter, they don't have eyes like we do.
Dude, this is reminding me of a story. Did I ever tell you about the time in Whole Foods that I stared at these guys for like a long time?
In Austin.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
It was really weird. They were two out-of-place guys standing. I remember I passed them, and like, there was just something very off about them. And like, we like locked eyes, and they were looking at me like, we know you can see us.
Wow, this is so
And
weird.
I was like, I looked at them for probably 15 seconds. We were just staring at each other. And it just felt like they knew that I could see them in a way that was more than they were just random human beings.
Yeah.
And they were looking at me like, we know that you can see us. Because I was just staring at them. I was just like, whoa, and it's happened to me more than once.
They were probably standing there and they're like, dude, doesn't it feel like he's looking at us like he knows we can see him?
Dude, that's so funny. Yeah, they're like, that guy looks weird. What's going on?
Why is he looking at me like that?
That guy's a demon.
I think something wrong with that guy.
The guy's like, that guy is looking at us like he's a demon. No, I don't think that. Dude, living in that city, you see any city, there's going to be a host of just random bizarre people. And if you believe in any sort of this stuff, cities are going to be populated with these sort of
that's where you would want to hide away too.
Exactly.
Especially.
You can blend in with all the other weirdos.
It's like an Angel, and then a great TV series from the 90s, and like we lived in like LA or something, because like that's where you go if you want to
angels live.
Get away with being a vampire.
That's where the demons are. Yeah. That's really weird when you were saying that. It was so bizarre because I was listening to an episode of Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis about the Black Eyed Kids, and he had a caller call in and basically tell the exact same story.
Oh, really?
This guy gets a call from someone that's saying he won some sweepstakes at the grocery store and he can come collect his prize, whatever. And the guy just didn't seem right, didn't trust it, but he went anyway. And he said, well, I don't want it, whatever. But he went just to see what was going on. And when he got there was this very tall man walking around with these little children around him. And he said when he saw this man, it was so bizarre because there was something, he couldn't put his finger on it, but he just wasn't right. And all of the kids moved in lockstep with each other. Mm-hmm. They weren't, obnoxious kids running around, yelling, making noise. They were all like moving almost like, synchronistic swimming, where everything was in motion the same. And this guy just had this feeling about him and this strange, presence, and he ended up locking eyes with this guy. And this guy who, I'm talking about, he was in line, because he was just trying to play it cool, and he was
at Whole
checking
Foods
out
in Austin.
I don't know, maybe I think it might have been in Texas, but he locked eyes with this guy while he was in
where
line.
it first started was in Texas,
Abilene. Yeah, that story.
So this guy looks over and he's locked eyes at this point because he's telling this guy mentally I know that you're not right, and this guy is just looking back at him with this that same kind of
interesting
feeling, until the lady at the register is like, sir, do you want to check out, because you're just standing there staring at this dude. But he doesn't look away. He's still staring at this guy until the guy eventually turns kind of slowly and lumbers in all his little children minion. And I don't know if he said
his
the kids
octopi.
Yeah, his octopi childs. I don't know if he said that the kids had dark eyes or anything like that, but there was just a weird connection there, something bizarre, where you sense something from people at times, and they could be hiding among us. You know?
I mean, there's a lot of accounts of that kind of stuff going on. But I forgot to mention that they did have black eyes. I wasn't super close to them.
Whoa, what?
That's one of the weird. That's why I locked eyes with them in the first place.
Black or just look dark?
They just looked very dark.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't close enough to see But it was I looked at him and I was like, whoa, that's weird. And that's what caught my attention.
There wasn't any luminance coming from
it
the
was
eyes.
just
this is so weird.
Cold shark eyes. That's what I remember.
It's extremely strange because as we're talking about this, I'm remembering a story that happened to me in Louisiana, New Orleans, with a guy with black eyes.
Before you tell that story,
let's take a break and then come back with that, because that is a creepy story.
Yeah.
Was that the one with mom and dad?
Yep.
Oh God. Yeah, that's
an old hotel.
That's one of the creepier some that I've heard.
And these scary stories somehow have a way of escaping my memory. Until someone jogs them,
someone triggers you.
Then I blocked out that evil somehow.
That's a good story. Well, let's take a break and come back.
All right, sounds good, guys. We'll see you in a moment.
Bye-bye.
Come to me. The man in the dark said. Come to me. The man in the dark said. Don't be afraid. Come with me.
You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
Come to me.
We are back.
Welcome back.
And I got a little story I want to share. I totally forgot about this. I feel like sometimes, it's not like it was so traumatic that I blocked it out, but it was disturbing at the time. And I wonder if sometimes your brain is just like, we're going to erase that little
because
bit.
it doesn't make sense with the rest of your reality.
It's not something you need to keep in your cache locked closely to your life.
It's just like a little bit of darkness that you don't need to carry around with you.
Yeah.
So your brain's like
we wake up every day and you're like, oh, remember that time that really fucking dark thing happened?
Exactly.
I'm going to think about that.
Let's remind myself about that.
Good story. Why don't you relive it?
All right,
retell it. And I'll drink my Mountain Dew.
This was back in, I want to say, 2000 and something or other.
I'd say like 13 or 14 maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
That sounds right.
I was traveling down to Texas with my folks, and we parlayed in New Orleans.
Well done.
We parlayed in New Orleans.
I don't even know what that means. That's a dance?
To talk to pirates.
All right, so we stopped off in New Orleans and stayed at this old hotel. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'll put it in the show notes.
New Orleans is a weird place to be.
It is. There's a lot of black magic. When I was there,
voodoo.
A lot of history.
I was kind of bummed because I was with my mom and dad, so I couldn't really visit the nightlife. But like, there are all these goth clubs and black magic bookstores, and it's just a place like when you're there, it's like I should at least experience this, like take it in carefully. You know, it's not like I'm going to start dancing with glow sticks with the devil at some goth club, but
devil rave.
Yeah, but I was curious about it. I wanted I wanted to check out the atmosphere, but I couldn't. Anyways, so we stayed at this old freaky hotel.
Spooky.
Very spooky. And when we get in there, we're trying to figure out, where's our room at? But eventually we get our bags checked in. Well, it's not an airplane. We get checked into the hotel, and we get in the elevator, and it's mom, dad, and me. And I can't remember if this man was already in the elevator or if we held the door for him, but I think it was more like he was standing in the elevator and dad was like, oh, let me get in there, and then got the doors open for us to get in.
Oh
yeah.
God.
So our dad, just so you guys know, is the most loving, kind,
sweet guy.
Very sweet guy. Just wants to make friends with everybody.
Yeah.
Which is what he tried to do.
Not much going on his radar as far as potential
demonic entities.
Right. If there was like if there's an evil thing.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your story.
But in dad's nature, in his
very
embracing, adventurous nature, when you get in there and it's the three of us cornered in this elevator, and then this tall man. And no, and elevators are awkward. You don't usually make eye contact, right? And but we get in there, so dad initially starts small talk with this man.
What does he look like?
Okay, so I'm looking down at his feet. It's it's kind of awkward. I glance at him, but he just looks like a normal guy with, I think, maybe a white T-shirt, cargo shorts, and
blood on his sneakers,
brown boots that you would expect like a construction guy to wear, just like your basic thumpers, right?
Okay. Did you not make eye contact with him?
So
you're just following elevator etiquette.
Okay, so I'm following the elevator etiquette. I just want to get up to the room, and I knew Dad's going to say something, and he's like, so, how's your day going? And silence. Meanwhile, I'm looking down at this guy's feet, and it's these brown boots, and there's paint on them, white paint. I'm thinking, okay, this guy's like a construction worker. He's working somewhere around here. That's why he doesn't really fit in this hotel. It's not like he's dressed up to stay there. He's just kind of wearing ratty clothes with these boots with white paint. But then I noticed the white paint seems purposeful, like it's in designs, like little symbols on his boots.
Ooh.
And I think that's kind of weird. And then I start to glance up, and I see white paint on his face. And meanwhile, he still hasn't responded to Dad. And I look over at Dad, and Dad does this thing where he kind of like, when he's uncomfortable, he just kind of like looks down and away. And as I looked at this guy, I noticed that what he was doing was this domination. It was just like, I'm not going to respond to you. I'm going to dominate, and I'm going to stand here in this silence until you deal with that.
Cower in fear.
Exactly. So as I get a better look at his face, I notice that there's white paint on his face too, and on his arms. But there's also blood coming out of his ear. And then all that I can remember about his eyes is being dark, like pitch dark. Like I'm not going to say that they were just black, but there was a darkness where it was, you looked at it and you wanted to look away.
Like a cold baby shark.
Yes, like
or just a regular.
Why is he baby?
Size.
Or a regular shark.
Because he's the size of a human. A baby shark is.
Really? Baby sharks are like 6 foot?
It's more. It's closer than
that's true. Some sharks
large
are
shark.
Large. That's true. Some large sharks are like 12 feet.
Like the eyes of a cold baby shark.
So I'm standing here with this baby shark in boots, and yeah, it was just this feeling of just like evil.
Dread. Yeah.
And when we got out of the elevator, we walked back to the room in silence, and we all looked at each other, and I think Mom was the first one to say, like, wasn't that weird? That was so
bizarre. I can hear her saying bizarre.
There was something so strange that, and then I mean, so much so that like I immediately sat down and started looking up, Googling
the name of the hotel.
The name of the hotel, see if there was black witchcraft in the area. Because what it felt like to me was his attitude, his demeanor was definitely like dominating. It was the sense of just like I have just hate.
Yeah.
And with the what looked like ritual paintings on his boots, and then the blood and everything and the darkness, it made me wonder if this guy was involved in some kind of witchcraft or something, and or possession ritual, and was trying to dominate Dad with some sort of like
that was what I was going to ask you.
Magic.
What I was going to ask you was when he, you said you felt that dominating thing that he was doing. So, and he never responded to Dad. Was he looking at you?
He was staring right at.
So it's not like he was uncomfortable by Dad talking in the elevator. He was staring him down.
He was staring
and not responding.
Yeah, and you know when someone's doing that. Like, you know when someone. Well, I've never seen it done that dramatically, but you can tell if someone's just like. You know.
Yeah, just staring you down.
Right.
And who can I feel like only a demon could be mean to Dad. Like he's just like this little like nice little gremlin man, just, you know, like, hey, what's your life like? Tell me all about it.
Yeah, he's just a sweet guy.
Maybe that's why he wanted to be mean to him.
Probably.
He wanted to kill Dad's heart.
He found the brightest
glowing
light.
like ball of light, and he's just like, I will snuff you out.
Exactly. Yeah, he wanted to destroy the love.
Oh, he survived.
Anyway, so the whole point of that story, the reason it reminded me of that was just the eyes. You know, with these black-eyed kids, and that sense of just like malevolence, you know, just sensed evil, and it was just so palpable, and that seems so prevalent through these stories.
Palpable.
Yes, John. Palpable,
pervasive,
so
prevalent.
It's funny because I picked out a story about an elevator with a man in it with black eyes.
Maybe it's the same guy. Did this take place in New Orleans?
This is in Australia.
Ooh.
Floor's here.
Floor, floor. And this one I almost didn't bring in because it's not as easy to find the origin for as far as the stories go. I found several really good stories from people like David Weatherly, who wrote a couple of good books, and Nick Redfern's always researching this stuff. But even though this one doesn't have like a really tight origin for where it came from, you can find it on a lot of different sites.
Tight origin.
That's a good way of saying like it's probably fake.
It might be. But the reason why I wanted to read it was because before you brought up your elevator story, I was going to bring this up hoping that it would remind you of your elevator story. And so I figured I should probably read it.
Go for it.
So this happened in Australia, allegedly, but it is a good story, regardless if it's true or not. It sounds like it could be. So this one comes from several different sites. You can find it at paranormalist.com. There's like Message to Eagle or something where it's on. If you can find the original post of this and let us know at beliefful.com, let me know where it came from. I would like to know how credible it is or if it's completely creepypasta. It's a good story though. It was September 2nd, 2000. And one of the roles as an executive is you sometimes have to put in really late nights. My office was on the 5th floor and it was coming up to 12 in the morning. I was the only employee, as far as I know, on the first 5 floors apart from Ben, another fellow banker, and Stan, who was a security officer. The elevator stops at floor 2, and in comes a tall man with more or less a black crew cut. The first thing I did was open my mouth to ask what sector he was from and who gave him permission, but as I looked into his eyes, they were entirely black. The pupils and retinas, everything. I remember not really being spooked about his eyes. To be honest, I just thought he might have had a disability. As the elevator slowly starts up, moving back en route, he asked me where I was going, and I simply replied, home. He then asked why, and I more or less laughed and just said I wanted to go to sleep and see my wife. He then just muttered very softly, like he was talking to himself.
Must be nice to have a home.
I figured he was just being friendly and that he must be renting. As we got to B1, I realized he hadn't pushed the button on where he was going, so I asked, "Where are you going?" To which he replied rather angrily, looking at me with his creepy eyes,
"Nowhere."
At this point, the eyewitness stated he ran to his car. When he looked behind him, he noticed the strange man in the elevator did not get out. He continues on with his account. As I drove down the street, all the lights were out, and this is in Sydney. Then I turned, and walking just ahead of the car is the same black-eyed man. I sped home, probably breaking 5 road laws. How could he have left the building and be ahead of me when he had no car, and went up to floor 6? It gets weirder. On the videotapes and records, there's no one using the elevator at the time apart from me.
Weird.
Yeah.
Fake.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. Where does this come from?
Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just sounds like a creepypasta.
It just sounded, it could be. It reminded me of your elevator story.
Don't mess up our show with creepypastas,
I don't
Chris.
know that it's a creepypasta.
You don't know anything.
It just reminded me of your elevator experience, so I thought it was valid to
Well,
bring
I'm
to
a
the show.
human person right here talking to you with my story.
No,
Fine.
Chris, we have a special noise for you that we like to use for this.
There you go.
No, I'm joking.
That's
I'll take it.
Stinker.
Give me a bird story.
Oh yeah, John, you want a story? Read the motel story.
Well, hold on. Are we just going to keep reading creepypastas?
No, this
here?
one is not. This one is from Michael Vasey's research. He actually spoke with this person who recounted the story.
So at least we know an author who legitimately
right.
attests to speaking with this witness.
All right, here we go. This is called the Black-Eyed Motel.
Well, I just titled
Okay, it's not a real story.
You can say where it came from, though.
The Chilling True Terror of the Black-Eyed Kids by G. Michael Vasey. I took my family on vacation last year. We stayed at a motel near Lake County, California. It's a nice area with plenty of things for the kids to do. Everything had been going well, and we had been having a lot of fun. On our fourth night, we were in our room watching TV when someone knocked on the door. We weren't expecting any visitors, so I elected to ignore it. The knocking continued, and whatever was on the other side of the door started growling. I shouted out and told them that they had the wrong room. The knocking ceased. A few moments later, it started again, and a voice started shouting, "Let me in!" Oops, it was a female voice. But it was devoid of any emotion. Then we started to hear the same thing happening up and down the corridor. Multiple voices all screaming. We were terrified at this point, wondering what was going on. I got up and looked out of the window. 2 people were walking into the building. Both looked normal until one noticed that I was standing at the window. I saw her eyes. They were completely black. In every other sense, she looked normal, but I am sure both the girl who saw me and the man she was with had black eyes. When the commotion finally died down, I ventured out of our room and went over to the reception block. The receptionist told me that she had received no complaints and had been on duty the whole time. She had no explanation for what I was telling her. I think she thought I was insane. I just wonder what would have happened if I had opened the door. Would I still be here to tell this story? We won't be going to Lake County again, I can tell you that much.
Submitted by Rick R. Yeah, and that's the thing with even Weatherly in his research. A lot of the stories come from people that have sent him stories after they've read his other work, and he's in communication with a lot of these people. It must be nice to have a home. Poor guy.
That'd be funny.
Poor elevator demon.
Must be nice.
That is sad.
But yeah, those are the stories. I mean, there's a lot of stories out there. I obviously the elevator one. I don't know. It's a fun story. I think why it's fun to discuss and its potentiality being truth.
It has nodes of truth.
Oh, Jeremy, you and your nodes. Is that it related to your story? And also, like, one day I'd like to do an episode on like elevator games and Lisa Lamb and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other
thing.
Time. Elevators are creepy.
Yeah, they are creepy. Weird things can happen on
Prince
an elevator.
thought that elevators were evil, and he'd end up dying in one.
Yeah,
they said they go to hell, right?
Yeah, he never wanted to be in one, and then that's where he was
pretty freaking
killed.
Strange.
That's where they murdered him.
There's a lot of weird. This with all celebrities that died seem to be some weird.
Yeah.
Before we end
that'll be an episode coming up.
Yep.
Before we end the story section, let's tell mine.
Yeah.
You got a story?
I have the actual from his own words. Robert from Indiana.
Oh, okay. You got
okay.
Yeah.
So this was on a radio broadcast. You heard?
So we've referenced this show multiple times on our show called Ground Zero. It's a national radio show. Really good. They cover conspiracy, paranormal, but they did an episode on Black-Eyed Kids and solicited calls from anyone who'd experienced anything. And this came as one of the calls from a guy named Robert in Indiana. So let's just play that and then we can discuss.
I'm going to do it.
Yes, I missed that.
Years ago, we was out fishing underneath the truffle. It was me and my cousin. And we were coming up from fishing. It was about 10 at night. Came up to the top of the truffle. There was a young kid standing up there. He had a hoodie on. And he had asked us to come here. We walked over towards him, and he said, "Could you walk me across the truffle?" Well, about that time, he had looked up, and he had black eyes, and his teeth almost looked like they went to a point, which took us both back. Right then, we said no and just got out of there. But when we were there was a guy across the trestle fishing. Now, we get about halfway home, which was a couple miles, and we hear a helicopter. And what that was a lifeline. The guy that was still out there fishing ended up diving off of the trestle, face diving, and committed suicide. This exactly when we left, this boy had come up and asked us. He had the image of a kid, the body of a kid. You knew as soon as he put his head up, you knew automatically this was something very demonic. And the guy that was fishing right across from us, it wasn't even 20 minutes, maybe 25, and that's when the helicopter flew over. We didn't find out until the next day that it was that guy had went to the middle of the trestle and dove off head first and committed suicide.
It's interesting because the trestle again just reminds you of like Goat Man.
Well, the story with the Goat Man is he would summon you, and then the legend was he would convince you to jump.
Oh,
that
weird.
was one of the legends. And I mean,
the same thing taking different forms, maybe.
The idea of this thing being whatever it is, whatever demonic entity or, I mean, there's all kinds of theories, but the potential idea of it being a soul collector, right? Something that is feeding off of misery, off of darkness, or just trying to bring about.
Isn't that what a demon is essentially, though?
Yeah, for sure. And that's where the demon theory comes from. There are people that believe it's grays, aliens, and that these are
hybrids.
Which because the black
maybe
eyes.
Maybe there could be some crossover.
Right.
I mean, the hybrid idea would make sense just as far as the aesthetic appearance of a child with black alien-like eyes, with telepathic powers.
With that story in particular, I thought it was interesting because it kind of shows what would happen if this is a true story. What might happen if you go along with the child, right? You let him in, or you do it, you invite it in. You
that's as
give
close
over your will.
as we have. Maybe it's not like they do something to you, but you have to do it to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sort of like, what's that one movie, Event Horizon?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Where everyone, that's such a
they basically
movie.
like warp instead of by bending space and time, they travel through space, but they end up like traveling to a hell dimension.
Yeah.
They open a hole,
We talked about Sam Neill and his skin sack on like one of the first episodes.
That's right. But the whole point, when they went that place, they ended up ripping their eyes out.
Yeah.
And it was like so awful that they just were like...
couldn't handle it.
Yeah, they couldn't handle it.
When it's like the dark became good to them.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Hellraiser.
Start living in it.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing. I mean, especially if someone like that on the trestle was maybe not mentally stable to begin with, or was in a really dark place.
Right.
And then he runs into something where they can push you over the edge.
Yeah, just mentally and emotionally push you.
Especially if he's out there fishing. Like, you don't fish and then go kill it. I imagine like you're not going to get all your tackle and all your gear and then decide to go end your life on the top of the trestle.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be kind of a good way to go out.
Fulfill your last hobby.
Like, yeah, I don't know. It is weird. I mean, it seems fishy.
Yeah. Pun intended.
Pun
but what I was
intended.
going to say about that story, which was also interesting, is when he started talking about the teeth, how they came to a point.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating because it reminds me of another black encounter I heard with an actual person. A black-eyed.
You encountered a black
black-eyed person, and describing her encounter when she was a child and she left this convenience store and all of her family members were gone except for her and her sister, and they wandered for like miles because everything was gone, the place was empty, but they came across this playground with these kids, but these kids on the playground had big black eyes and the sharp teeth. And her thought was, they're going to eat us, we have to run. And they ran for hours and finally came out and found their parents, and they were like, you've only been gone for like 10 minutes.
Right.
What it also reminds me of was that story from the guy that related to kind of missing 411 encounters from the 90s, where he was in the Amazon and wore colored socks and all of a sudden found himself in a different place with these creatures that looked like children that had sharp teeth and big eyes. But
really?
Yeah, and they came after him because the natives said, don't wear colored clothing. And he wore colored socks. He thought he was safe under his clothes. Also thought it was just like superstition. But he was gone for hours or whatever.
Well, they took him to the fairyland. Like that's one of the examples. That's weird because I was thinking about this story when I was researching possible explanations for this. And one of them is the changeling and the fairies.
Yeah.
And these things that abduct people.
Well, maybe we should take a break and come back and then get to some maybe the possible origins for these black-eyed kids.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back, guys.
From the break. Hope you didn't answer your door or your phone.
Well,
I don't know. Can they
we
come
hope
through
you
the phone?
answer your phone.
We didn't touch on that yet. That's what was always the kind of interesting aspect to me was when they would knock on your door at night and ask. Because I thought maybe you'd have a story like that, Chris, but you failed me. Where they would knock on the door and then ask to use your phone.
Yeah, I guess I went right to the crazy one that was so out there, but I feel like everybody knows the phone thing.
Well, no, people that haven't heard the story, one of the things that are interesting to me is when
they want to use the phone.
They'll knock on the door and be like, Mister, we need to use your phone. We need to call our mom. We're lost. And then they'll be like, okay, well, here's my cell phone. And they'll be like, we need to come in. We need to use your landline.
Right, yeah.
Or we need to use your phone inside. I don't even know if they use the word landline.
We need to be on the inside.
Do you have Ethernet?
The cell phone won't work because they need an excuse to get into the house.
Exactly,
they need that invitation.
Yeah.
And unless, someone's like, well, maybe there's a connection with the landline. Maybe they need to access something that's plugged into the wall. I'm like, what? They're like in the Matrix. They need to call the operator and get out.
No, I think it's probably just need to get in the house.
I think it's an excuse.
They need an invitation to get inside your place of safety. Well, I want to talk about some possible explanations for these, at least as far as like folklore is concerned, as far as like historical.
It could be just children without parents.
And eyes.
Could be. What was the eyes? The eyes thing.
With contacts.
People say contacts, black contacts. But
in the 90s?
When Brian Bethel told us, 1996, they did not have, and even today, like I dated a girl who was into special effects and
she had contacts, didn't she?
She had tons of different kinds of contacts, but those are, first of all, very dangerous to put in.
Right, then you can only wear them for so long.
If they cover the whole, I'm not an optometrist. The whole scaliclia. What's the
scaliclia?
What's the whole? Everybody out there is listening who knows eye parts will be laughing.
The white
at
part.
Me. Thank you. The white part. Something like that. Scallops. Anyway, so to put those in, that's dangerous. Even like high end ones.
I don't think you need to even go further than just the time period. Like kids that age don't have access to black
contacts
in the 90s. Like,
well,
there's no Amazon.
I remember the first person I ever saw with contacts was in high school, and that was like 2000 and something. But they were like
vampire blue.
They can cover the whole white part.
Yeah, they just color usually the ones that I noticed around that time were like a bright blue or just something weird.
We're probably thinking of the same guy.
But that wasn't even until
he was the guy we mentioned in the last episode who said he could see in the dark.
But that wasn't until the 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think these kids had access to
96
black
special effects.
They're dangerous, apparently.
Plus, there's stories we didn't cover that go back as far
as it's real.
As far as the 1920s or before. You didn't have contacts back then. So anyway, as far as like the possible origins of these tight origins,
demons.
This could be demons for sure. We already talked about the Men in Black connection. Obviously, is there a connection there? They have the like the head covering. Is it a hood or a fedora?
No, I don't think so.
No, what are the colors of the skin? Ashen gray or yellowy? They say things that are strange and out of place.
Maybe that they are also
intimidation is the main goal.
These are both other dimensional kinds of things potentially, but. I don't know. The Men in Black, they seem to have a specific
motivation
where they're going to silence or
specific motivation.
They're not trying to terrify and feed off energy, potentially eat your soul. Or kill you.
Right,
whatever.
to get you to shut up.
Yeah, it's there's not a malevolence. This seems to have a more primal, demonic feeling to it.
Yeah, literal vampire. We need your soul.
Exactly.
We need to eat your energy, light,
and we need to come in.
Precedes the eating of the light.
Yes.
The coming in.
So this comes from Michael Vasey's book, and I've read this other places online, but talking about like a historical thing that you can relate the black-eyed kids to.
Okay.
Iroquois folklore.
Who are the Iroquois?
Iroquois folklore.
For those that aren't familiar with Native American tribes.
The Iroquois?
Is that a Native American tribe?
I would hope people listening would know the Iroquois are a Native American tribe, yes. Actually from our region, right below Lake Erie and into Canada a little bit. The Iroquois, yeah. The Mohawk Valley.
What's their myth?
The Iroquois Indians believed in a dark power called the Otcon that could take over children, and an evil one who would mate with human females to produce black-eyed, chalky-skinned children. Kind of right on the head there. These children were killed by the tribe soon after birth and burned to stop them from resurrecting. Children wandering alone in the woods could also be taken over by Otcon and would reemerge with black eyes and pale skin, acting nervously while repeating themselves over and over.
Like let us in.
Like let us in. As far as like folklore goes, I think that's the closest thing out there.
Black eyes, chalky skin.
Definitely some interesting tie-ins there, though, as far as like come on, black-eyed children with chalky skin who repeat themselves and are the part of it that it was cut out of his explanation or his description of the folklore, but I found online was like, they were said to be really ferocious. They were very mean and often had a taste for human flesh. So very dark indeed.
They're called
Well, they weren't called the Otcon. That was the negative force that the Iroquois believed in. There's a good force, a light force, and a dark force.
Well, it sounds like every other religion, to some degree. The light and the dark. The oldest story in the book.
The Orenda and the Otcon. It's like they're good and bad energy.
Okay, so I imagine that the Otcon would be responsible for these children.
Yeah, that's the energy that would invade them, invade these children, and were used to destroy other people and almost vampire-like convert other children into black-eyed children.
So in other mythology, it's interesting because it's going to jump me in here.
I was going to jump you in there?
This is there's something called the
dovetail.
Anku from Celtic mythology.
Oh, okay.
And when I was looking for this, I realized it's hard to find a lot of good fairy information on the internet.
I didn't know that.
That's true. Just when you're Googling fairy stuff.
Well, there's a lot of fairy fan fiction out there.
Well, I did. So one thing I found, because I was interested in the mesmerism of the eyes, right? Like these things can like lock onto you.
That's like vampire lore too.
Right. One reference I found for that came from realfairies.net.
That's a good site.
And I knew it was good source material because their tagline is authentic information channeled from the fairy realm.
Well, you can't go wrong with that.
As long as it's channeled.
Peer-reviewed fairies.
I love the combination of authentic information with channeled. So good. Maybe.
Well, it can be authentic. It doesn't necessarily mean it's...
That's true. They're not just making it up. They're actually working to channel something, and maybe they are.
Not peer-reviewed, most likely. Though.
Well, yeah. Well, unless maybe by other channelers.
By other fairies.
Yeah, who are their peers is the question.
We talked about channeling before, and there are people that are into it, and I think that there is something that comes from the other side that whether you know its intentions or not.
Right.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Edgar Casey and, you know.
They reference multiple types of fairy beings that are able to mesmerize, saying that you must, quote, avert your eyes because as soon as they have your attention, you are under their control, which of course sounds like in Brian Bethel's story, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't until he looked away and broke his contact that he realized his hand was going towards the
unlock door. So much like the old vampire stories.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like seduction.
Sexy.
You almost have to break out of the spell.
Yeah, it's being spellbound.
It makes me think of Fright Night and that when they're in the dance club.
Oh, the dance club scene.
It's like boom, ba-ta-ba-ta, boom, boom, ba-ta-ba-ta. And she's just like...
The great 80s with those like a fog machine on the dance floor.
Yeah, playing that awesome 80s song.
Permed hair. She was Al Bundy's neighbor later on.
Yeah.
There's a song where they were making love to that song, and this guy who did some of the composing for the movie, he wrote like all these lyrics to it.
Oh, that's right.
I remember hearing that. Yeah, and they were like,
no, let's just keep the music. And then so he did, but then like people after that would write in and say like, my wife and I really need this song. Can you give us? We need like the full track because they would it was so seductive.
Copulate
and. He's like, yeah, do you want the one with the like lyrics and stuff though? So he would like send out the version with the lyrics and everything.
He's like, I need my voice heard.
It's a great documentary on that.
I wish we could play that song right now.
Making a Fright Night.
Let's drop a clip of that. That'd be so good.
All right, coming back to this app.
Okay, so the Anku. This is another potential mythological connection. I thought this was kind of a cool story. This comes from Celtic mythology, and this doesn't come from realfairies.net. This actually comes from a better source.
I'll take your word for it.
I think it's an encyclopedia of fairies written in the 70s, I think.
Okay.
We'll link in the show notes. Okay, so the Anku, or Anko, the fairy embodiment of death in Celtic folklore. This is where the connections come in. Depicted as an eerie figure who is dressed in a black hooded robe with his face hidden from view. Sound familiar? Mm. Some legends hold that he was once an unnamed prince who loved hunting and taking risks. As he was out on a hunt one day, he encountered Death, who challenged him to a hunting match. The winner would be given the power to decide the loser's destiny. Kind of like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
Oh, yeah. Documentary.
The prince lost and was condemned by Death to collect souls forever. Now he is said to roam the earth with a spectral horse-drawn cart accompanied by two ghostly figures on foot and stops at the house of one who is about to die. It knocks on the door, making a sound that is sometimes heard by the living, or gives out a mournful wail like the Irish banshee. Sometimes it's reported to be seen as an apparition entering the house. It takes away the dead, who are then placed in the cart with the help of the two companion ghosts. Now that reminds me of these hooded things coming house to house collecting.
Knocking on the door.
With these two smaller ghostly entities, maybe these two children ghostly entities also hooded,
it's
perhaps.
A bit of a stretch, but it's folklore. There could be pieces of truth in there.
Yeah.
Pieces of... God,
that's terrifying. Stop, it scares
it's actually
me.
You saying you're talking a lot, pitched down 40
Wow, really?
tones, yeah.
But the closest thing that this represents, I think, and this was actually referenced in one of Brian Bethel's early posts, someone responded.
Oh, changelings, right?
Changelings. Yeah, one of Brian Bethel's early posts in 97 in that Google group where he posted initially about this, one person responded, and she said she had a grandmother who came from a pagan Irish Celtic background. And she said that whenever a new member of the family was born, she would have to check the eyes to make sure that the eyes weren't black. Because if they were, then it was a sign that the child was a changeling.
Oh, wow. So they actually had, the changelings were known to have black eyes? That was one of the telltale signs?
According to her, I tried to find a direct connection to that with changelings. The closest thing I could find, well, here, I'll read a brief description of what the changeling is.
Okay.
Because I think it's interesting. Changeling in European folklore is a deformed offspring of fairies or elves substituted by them surreptitiously for a human infant.
Yeah, they trade them out, right?
Yeah. According to the legend, the abducted human children are given to the devil or used to strengthen fairy stock. The return of the original child may be affected by making the changeling laugh or by torturing it. This latter belief was responsible for numerous cases of actual child abuse.
Oh, that's sad.
They would sometimes throw it in the fire if they believed if they threw it in the fire, it would fly off through the chimney and the real child would be delivered back.
Ugh. It's like the witch trials shit.
Pretty dark if that didn't work out that way. The existence of changelings is believed to stem from the idea that infants are susceptible to demonic possession. So supposedly, these changelings are supposed to have black eyes, according to that initial post in response to Bethel's story. I couldn't find that direct connection with the black eyes, but I did find dark eyes, and the closest thing I found was this poem about the changelings. This would be good with some music behind it.
Okay, we'll do that.
It's loading.
Oh.
Okay, this comes from the Dublin Penny Journal in 1833. The summer sun was sinking with a mild light, calm and mellow. It shone on my little boy's bonny cheeks and his loose locks of yellow. The robin was singing sweetly, and his song was sad and tender, and my little boy's eyes, as he heard the song, smiled with a sweet, soft splendor. I sat alone in my cottage, the midnight needle plying. I feared for my child, for the rush's light in the socket now was dying. There came a hand to my lonely latch, like the wind at midnight moaning. I knelt to pray, but rose again, for I heard my little boy groaning. I crossed my brow and I crossed my breast, but that night my child departed. They left a weakling in his stead, and I am broken-hearted. Oh, it cannot be, my own sweet boy, for his eyes are dim and hollow. My little boy is gone to God, and his mother soon will follow.
That's sad.
He was replaced by a changeling.
Or he just died.
Well, not according to the author.
It's like his eyes get dim and hollow, and then he goes to God.
Well...
Sounds like death.
I mean, you can read into what you may.
It's a black-eyed kid!
No, but the idea is that it is about a changeling. We'll link that in the show notes. But
yeah, you guys can decide on your own.
But something comes to the door, and it's often precursored by this cold wind. Like that's another thing in the lore of fairies.
The cold wind. You know, it sounds very familiar to and this is short, but it sounds very familiar from folklore from our own ancestry, Scandinavia. In Scandinavian folklore, there's something called the mealing, the meningar. They are the phantasmal incarnations of the souls of abandoned or unbaptized children that had been forced to roam the earth until they could persuade someone to bury them properly. The word utbörd means that which is taken outside and refers to the practice of abandoning unwanted children in the woods or in other remote places where death is almost certain to befall them. It is believed that the ghosts of the child will then haunt the place where they had died or, as told in countless stories, the dwellings of their killers. The belief that mealings are enraged and seeking revenge is what gave them the reputation as one of the most menacing types of ghosts in Scandinavian folklore. And what's interesting about these is there's stories in Scandinavian folklore about them like hanging out around fences and stuff along roadways. People come by and seeing these children that are by themselves, you know, asking for a ride home. And one of the things I read about, I didn't include in that description, but supposedly they jump on your back and then they grow to massive size as you try to get them to the graveyard to bury them properly. And if you don't make it, then they blame you and they eat you up or take your soul or something. I mean, obviously not quite the same thing as a black-eyed child, but it's very interesting folklore.
I mean, the fairy one's interesting to me because a lot of it has to do with taking people away.
Right. The whole thing with fairies ties so closely to alien abduction, missing 411, this idea of people being enticed into a place, disappearing, never to be seen from again.
Right. Oh, yeah, that and the story that you mentioned earlier where that man was taken to this other realm with these small people, sharp teeth,
very
because he had colored socks,
very
right?
fairy-esque, yeah.
But this idea of taking people into a fairyland, There's a book I found from the 70s, and it talks about what happens when you're taken to fairyland. And it reminds me of like missing 411, people that just disappear and sometimes come back.
Right.
Sometimes not. And if there is this other world, in the example of the fairyland, there is a mythology that you could be taken as a child, you could be fed fairy food and fairy drink, and after 7 years, you could eventually become a real fairy or
fairy folk,
a creature that lives in this other dimension and be one of them, right? But the other idea of the other side of that token of the fairy abductions is that you would be taken away and raised, and then you would be sacrificed to the powers of hell in order to appease that demonic realm, because you didn't want to give fairy children away, so you'd come take the English.
Right, it was a replacement. Yeah, swap them out.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know how much of it correlates to exactly the black-eyed kids thing.
Completely.
It's exactly connected. No, it's interesting stuff. I think regardless, it's great. It's great folklore for Halloween, and I definitely think these things have ties to the real world. And you didn't mention it, but the idea of like thin places, you do these things coming through, like Silver Creek. John, you and I were talking about that the other day. We were walking Jakey, your dog, who looks like a miniature dogman, and how Silver Creek has those experiences of dogmen. The famous dogman encounter at Silver Creek, which is so weird because it's like 5 miles from here, and that's where I had my own kind of black-eyed kid experience that was super bizarre.
What?
Remember I telling you about this?
Why didn't you tell it a long time ago?
Well, I kept bringing it up, but I kept saying, well...
You could have replaced it for any of those meaningless stories.
Well, it's not obviously, I didn't see... the kid didn't have black eyes. I wasn't like... He didn't ask me to get into his car, and, he didn't try to take my soul. But it was just strange. There was a group of kids that had come out of the woods.
Tell it?
I'll tell it real quick. So, I was at Silver Creek Park, right here around where we live in Northeast Ohio, and at the time I didn't know anything about dogmen or the relation to that or any strange things that had happened in the area. And I remember one day I was out taking pictures, and I came back out of the trail and I was packing up, and then a group of kids came out, and there was one child that came out after the other ones. But the thing that was so weird about it, I'm not going to say he was a black-eyed child, black-eyed kid, but what was so bizarre about it was when he walked out, he immediately made eye contact with me, and I was way far away from everybody else. He came out, he was just staring at me the whole time, slowly walked towards me, and then just stood by a tree and just stared at me. But the look on his face was hate. Like he hated me. Like he knew me. That's what was so weird about it. And I was like, I gave this like little, hey. I thought maybe he was autistic or something.
He waved.
Yeah, I just thought like maybe some kid with some sort of mental disorder or something. But no parent came and claimed him. He just continued to stand there by himself. There was this presence of like he didn't belong to anybody there. He was there for just to look at me and to give me this gaze. That's what it felt like. And when I left, I didn't like approach. At the time, I wasn't like, I'm going to go see if this is a black-eyed kid. He didn't have black eyes, but he had this.
Would now.
No, I would now. But he looked, but he didn't have black. But he had this like sinister feeling around him that was just, and no one was there for him. He was completely by himself.
You said he came out following a group of kids, right?
Must be nice to have a home.
Yeah, it was like a group of kids came out, like some maybe birthday party or something. Everybody was like 10 years old.
He was probably going to eat them, and then he saw you, and he's like, I can't eat them in front of this guy, so he just looked at you like, that
could have been it. But it was just really so weird. He would not stop looking at me.
You were like his cock block.
Yeah, it's weird in that context, but I get what you're saying. But no, it reminded me interesting because of that Dogman story up there. Now that I know about that Silver Creek experience up there and the murders in the 70s that took place. Interesting place.
In Silver Creek? I know there are murders.
Yeah.
Dogman murders.
Well, is there anything else any more stories we were going to cover today?
No, I think that's about what we have for this episode. But
sweet.
We definitely gonna have some pretty baller stories coming up next. Some badass stories coming up next episode. Because the Halloween is here.
Nice. So yeah, get those in if you guys have any.
Yeah, anybody out there, please go to our website, belieful.com, and click on the send us a voicemail message or button and shoot us your creepy stories. Or if you guys have like the ability to record your own story at home and you want to send a longer one, because I think our speak pipes through our website max out about 90 seconds. So
send them in.
Send them in any way you can, and we look forward to hearing them and playing them on the show.
All right, guys. We will see you next episode. Get ready for Halloween because it's coming up.
Much love.
Bye-bye.